Our journey begins today with a longtime viewer of the show sending me an email asking me if I would be interested in his guitar for X price. Let's see what it is. Welcome back, Troglodytes, to your daily dose of guitar information, the Trogly's Guitar Show. Now don't get too excited, it's not actually a hammer. He was telling me this case is not original to the guitar, but is probably worth quite a bit to the right guy. But inside here, we have one of those weird, freaky 1980s Gibson E2 Explorers. It's not your grandfather's Explorer, that's the easiest way to put it. We're going to learn all about him today. This is one of those high-end fancy Explorers. It's everything you want. It probably was created because of things like the Dean Z becoming very popular. So Gibson thought, okay, maybe we could create a version of our Explorer like that too. So they did. I mean, there were a good amount of these things made. They're not necessarily impossible to find, but they're not as readily available as any of your other Explorers. But to learn about this maple neck, ebony fretboarded, maple topped, with a maple body Explorer, we need to go back. So you get the original 50s ones. They're made of Carina. Absolutely beautiful, ultra rare, even more expensive than a burst. But then they come back in 1976 made of mahogany, and otherwise, they're very similar. Are there some acute differences besides that? Sure. But that's the biggest thing to know about these big guys. They're mahogany now, and they stayed that way until the late 70s, when Gibson decided to evolve the Explorer. Meet the E2, the highly overly contoured Explorer that had a walnut maple sandwich body. You can find it with both layers being primary, so there's walnut and maple examples. They did the same thing with the neck. Unfortunately, that's one model I've never quite found the right example for me. But as I was telling you earlier, due to the market's reception of other guitars, it's possible that's what birthed the E2 CMT. CMT standing for curly maple top. Now, is that the only difference here? No. If you notice, we no longer have that sandwich pancake layer body with any of the additional contour comfort cuts. In fact, these things are just like completely different. Because look at how the neck joins to the body. It's like a whole inch off, kind of unusual. That's how many of the 70s style flying V's work. And I do like that on them, but I've never really been a big fan of the E2 as far as playability and construction, but I do think they look awesome. Because if you look at our Minty 76 friend here, the fretboard is flush against the body. It essentially rests right on top of it. But the neck of our E2 friend is just different. But these were offered in three main finishes. You get your cherry sunburst, which we're documenting today. You get an antique natural. We documented this one a few years ago. It was a great way to see all of the maple that these things have going on. But then you can also find kind of a tobacco sunburst version. Now, are there other hues out there? Probably, but those are the big three. As far as the history of the Explorer after that, in 1983, the alder body versions get introduced. So this is kind of a stripped down version of the 76, except for you don't have a pick guard, you've got your triangular layout. There are some other non-triangle layout ones that also have the pick guard, but it's only for like 83, 84, and very early 85 that the alder body exists before they switch over into mahogany. Now, all of what I've just said is pretty much true for the Flying V as well. There's a V2, there's a V2 CMT, and there's the shred ones. So if you're keeping track at home, that's alder, straight maple, maple walnut sandwich layers, alder, mahogany. Later on, you can find ash-bodied ones in the 2000s. You can find Explorers made out of a whole bunch of different body wood, including basswood. My second favorite Gibson body shape is the Explorer, so it's fun to learn about the few iterations that they did have. They're nowhere near as complex as the Les Paul to learn, but they're a lot of fun. But as far as the case goes, it looks like Hamer was using the same manufacturer as Gibson at this time, because the outside Tolex, everything looks just about the same except for the branding. I would argue their case compartment seems to be a little bit larger. So to learn more about this one, let's go ahead and throw it on the workbench, get it cleaned up, and take an individual look at its parts and specs, because uh-oh, a pickup has been replaced. 1 hour later of polishing, this thing is looking quite fantastic. So let's find out how it's currently spec'd. So these ship from the factory with Dirty Fingers pickups, which would look like this. You have a double row of pole pieces. They're ceramic magnets. They're pretty hot. They usually read around 15.5 to 16K ohms. However, if we flip this one over, it dates to August of 1979, and this is an 81 guitar, so it's possible this is not the original pickup to this particular guitar, but it is the correct model. A lot of people don't realize that Dirty Fingers actually did come out in the late 70s, and were mainly put on ES335 style guitars at first, before they found their home in Explorers and some select Flying Vs. But check out the natural wear to this. Do hard picking and bending, it would just naturally start to wear away the plastic bobbin. But this is how I could tell it wasn't original. You don't have the 2 rows of adjustable pole pieces. You've got your slug coils down here, so let's see. Well, it's pretty much a best case scenario. It's a Tim Shaw PAF. And if you look really closely, you can still see the markings. So it's a model 372, and then looks like it's a February of 1985. So nice, warm, mellow neck with an attacking bridge. I can see why that combination was put in here. But the bridge is 15.77 k ohms, neck position 7.31, and how do they play together? About 5. But now let's dive into our pickup cavities. So here we can see through to the maple body. You have a tenon running into the cavity, and not too much more different in your bridge pickup, but I know what you're wondering. How thick is the top on a CMT guitar? This has always personally bugged me, because CMT stands for curly maple top, but it's actually just a very thin veneer. You can barely even see the line. Now, it's not paper thin, it's about 1/8 of an inch, but it's pretty thin. It's not really a top per se. So the reason why they actually have a bound edge on these is not only to be fancy, but to hide that it's not like a full 1/4 inch top like the binding might suggest. Looks like somebody accidentally made another screw hole right there, but thankfully it gets covered over by our pickup ring. Something else a future owner might want to know about this: the neck pickup is actually a pretty short lead. Someone has spliced the lead onto some Fender style cloth wiring. That doesn't really affect anything for the function, but if you were trying to sell this off to get an original Dirty Fingers, that might matter to a buyer. But here's what these things look like with a pickguard off. They've got this regular route here that allows you to see through once again to our maple body. And the backside of our pickguard looks like so. And the guard itself is actually 5-ply with a black-white, black-white, black layering system. This one's got some scratches, but it polished up pretty nicely. I wonder if there's an E2 prototype out there that back-routed it so we didn't have any type of a pickguard. I think that would have been kind of cool. Because if you're going to take the time to put the curly maple veneer over it, you might as well show it off the best you can. But now our bridge and tailpiece. Bridge is nothing special. It's just a regular Gibson Nashville style, made by Schaller in Germany in this era. However, they did upgrade your tailpiece. You get the Superfly TP6. Now you might be saying, hey Trogly, is that one replaced? It looks chrome to me. Nah, it's gold. It's just completely worn off the top and edges. The bridge is pretty much equally as tarnished. The guy probably rested his hand right there. He had like a metal pick. That actually makes a lot of sense. I love how guitars can tell you a story of past owners, even without words. As far as our control layout, they just use speed knobs on this model. They've aged beautifully. It's just a neck volume, bridge volume, and a master tone. And let's take a second to appreciate the condition. It's got some nicks and dings and some scratches. Over here under your tailpiece, you got a couple of minor gouges. Certainly not trash by any means, but not clean enough for my own collection. That's the thing, whenever somebody sells me a guitar, I usually preface it with, hey, I can't guarantee I'm going to keep this guitar, and usually they don't care. They just want a quick, easy sale to somebody who's going to appreciate it and document it and have some fun. But we do have a lacquer rub right here. It's pretty common for these. How much does it stick up? A little over 1/2 inch over the body. And I think it has to do with how they set the neck angle for this model, because they could have put it like at least 1/4 of an inch deeper into the body. I'm not sure what their reasoning was behind that. But this is a gorgeous ebony fretboard. You can tell this is one that's been naturally played into the semi-glossy state, which means many of hours of play. However, I do not notice tons of fret wear. Like, is there a little bit? Sure. But nothing that I think you'll have to worry about for a while. But on top of it being ebony, it is real mother-of-pearl dot inlays. I measure a 1.7 inch nut width, increasing to 2.05 at the 12th. First fret neck depth 0.81, and straight up 1 by the 12th. And it's your usual 24 3/4 inch scale, and 12 inch fretboard radius. Moving on to our headstock, we can start with our truss rod. Here's a good way to see through to our maple neck. Our rod's in perfect shape, doesn't look like it's been adjusted too much in its life, turns both directions. And here's a look at the E2 truss rod cover, kind of your fancy cursive one, blending into the two. It's an interesting design, but the rest of this cleaned up pretty nicely. You've got some dings along the edge, but the lacquer has nicely yellowed over it, so you get your cool looking Gibson logo there. Oh, and I wanted to point this out. It looks like somebody might have put a really heavy gauge string for the E string at one point in time and wore out the original nut. So this is either somebody glued something in there to make it work properly, or it might be the baking soda super glue trick, but it's been expertly filed again, so it works just fine. I'm just all about saying everything I see. Another thing is the strap buttons. I was told these were the original ones. It came to me with some Dunlops on it. The bottom one has no gold left on it, but the screws are definitely not original. And many of these did ship with the posi lock buttons. However, this one's an 81, so that might have just been a little bit too early. Another thing that kind of backs that up is some of these also get the top adjust bridge, like this one, which was another shortly lived 80s Gibson part. So this might look familiar to you guys. We had just reviewed the Gibson Victory model. Those utilized hard rock maple bodies, and that's exactly what this is. I mean, this is a very dark kind of cherry finish, but when you get it in the bright lighting, you can see all the cool wood grain. But as far as our condition, you can see it's got buckle worming all over in the general area. Kind of a deeper gouge right there. Some scratching up here, as well as down here. But it's nice and beautifully polished and clean. Also looks like we've got some sort of a ding/finish rub up here. But now our control cavity. You can see what the raw maple looks like. But the wiring's definitely been messed with for the pickups. Actually, I cannot read the date code on that one anymore. This one's pretty much all covered up as well, as is this one. I can at least tell you they're the correct CTS stylings. These lacquer shrinking lines along the neck joint, those are very common on this model. Essentially just showing you where the neck joint's onto the body. The rest over here is looking okay. In relatively good shape for an Explorer. These tend to get a lot of wear over here because people with bracelets and whatnot. And this one's no exception as far as a couple of dings. There's a few dings in the binding in this area and a little bit of lacquer rub. But our back plate on this one is brown. Now let's check out our neck. So 3 pieces maple, just a little bit dark, so hard to see. You do have a couple of light dings, and we do have some finish wear along the edge of the neck. I just polished this up, so of course it's gonna feel clean, but I don't really feel that worn down glossiness, like where the body has a significantly different feel or anything. Late 70s, early 80s Explorers, they had like their own special serial number stamper, at least in Kalamazoo, because it's a smaller font than usual and they don't get the Made in USA stamp. Not every E2 CMT is like that though. It appears to be somewhere in 1982 when they changed the font up again for him and returned to the Made in USA stamping. But this one dates to the 118th day of 1981. It's production number 4 in Kalamazoo that day. But our tuners definitely have some wear to them, but still appears to be the original set, as they do say Gibson. And the way they construct the neck, 1, 2, 3 pieces of maple go straight up, and then they have another wing up here. You can see where that ends, and then they put on another piece right there. Then at first I was like, is that a second stamp? No, it's just a couple of dings. But now the blacklight test. Everything is good in our typical headstock break area. But okay, the edge of the neck does have some light clear coat rub. Here's the base side of the neck. You can see some more of the rubbing. Looks like we have some light lacquer chipping around the neck. That's not a big deal unless you see it around the entire neck. That's how you know the neck's been like broken off or something, but that just seems to be normal. As far as the back, honestly, I was expecting more sweat absorption areas. It's not too bad. You just see that ding, as well as like some strap clear coat wear down here and a rub through spot there. And of course the ones we saw earlier. That is glowing perfectly, as are our knobs. Even the pickup rings are taken apart in the show. And our headstock is looking good. Maybe a clip-on tuner rash or something. Here's the back in a different lighting situation. Yeah, that looks good without all the bright lights. So, how many pieces is the body? I do believe it's actually 3, but the dark finish hides it so well. So if you're wondering why this seems to have a one-piece top to it for a whole Explorer, it's because they can get away with it because it's a little bit of a thinner sheet. If they were to actually use maple that was one piece this big, I think these would have been a lot more expensive on the used market nowadays. And back then, but they did this sheet to kind of hide the multiple pieces to give it a more fancified look. Sometimes you can get lucky on these and get like super ultra flame figuring. This one, I mean, it's got a little bit, but it's nothing to brag about. So how much heavier is this from a regular Explorer? I mean, those are what, 8-ish pounds? This one is 10. Yeah, that is kind of heavy for an Explorer, I will admit, but The Heritage Cherry Sunburst color is one of my favorites out of the 80s of the common colors because it just looks so much better than the 70s Cloudburst in my opinion. I love that darker red hue. So let's go ahead, plug it in, hear how one of these sounds with the Tim Shaw PAF in the neck and a Dirty Fingers in the bridge. I'd say those pickups blend nicely together, but I can definitely see why someone was picking down here. That's like the sweet spot of this guitar because it kind of goes from slightly muddier sounding. Now let's try it with some dirt. There we go, the Gibson Explorer E2 from 1981 in the Heritage Cherry Sunburst finish. What are my final thoughts on this? I had a lot of fun. I mean, these are such cool looking guitars. Gibson really doesn't make that many flame top Explorers, so they're kind of notable in that aspect. But overall, it's really just the neck thing that I would make sure that you're aware of going into one of these. I find it a little bit less comfortable to play in the soloing areas on these. However, the big chunky neck gives you a little bit more to grab onto, but this has your standard Norland era wide flat frets. So you might consider refretting one of these if you're used to more modern fret wire. Another thing I might suggest if you don't like the feel of yours is change the TP6 tailpiece. I love the way these things look, but for whatever reason, every guitar I play that has one just has a certain not as good feel to it. It looks so modern, but yet still has kind of the vintage playability. Doing giant bends on these feels different from a modern guitar, so keep that in mind. But overall, I actually did enjoy this one. 10 pounds or not, it didn't feel as heavy on a strap. but it's a far cry from some of the Explorer Pros that we've documented in the past. But alright, Troglodytes, if you're interested in being the next owner of this one, you can find it for sale on my website, troglysguitarshow.com. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe, and we'll catch you tomorrow on the next one. Take care. If you enjoyed this episode, you would love this. It's just like it, but a flying V.